the headache, the helmet, and the olive. Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little older, a little dustier, and quite frankly, a little messier than our usual royal family trees. We're going way back, before the Habsburgs were even a glint in a confusingly shaped jawline, to the original dysfunctional family, the Greek pantheon. So go ahead and dim the lights, find a comfortable spot, let the worries of your day just sort of drift away like a ship lost in the Aegean. We're going to talk about Athena. Now, usually when we talk about Greek gods, it's all lightning bolts and tantrums and people turning into trees to avoid unwanted phone calls. And sure, Athena has some of that, but she's also the goddess of wisdom, which implies she was the only one on Mount Olympus who actually thought before she acted, which, if you know anything about her father, Zeus, sets a pretty low bar. Athena's story doesn't start with a cradle or a stork. It starts, predictably, with a prophecy and a case of indigestion. Her mother was Metis, a titaness who was generally considered the smartest person in the room. In fact, her name literally meant wisdom or cunning. You'd think being the personification of good ideas would help you avoid dating Zeus, but apparently even wisdom has its blind spots. Zeus, being the romantic that he was, heard a prophecy. The prophecy said that Metis would bear 2 children. The first would be a daughter, equal to him in strength and wisdom. The second would be a son who would overthrow him. Now, Zeus had overthrown his own father, Cronus, who had overthrown his father, Uranus. So Zeus was very aware of how this family tradition worked. He wasn't about to let himself get downsized by his own kid. So he did the rational thing. He tricked Metis into turning into a fly, or a drop of water, the accounts vary, but let's go with a fly because it's grosser. And he swallowed her, whole. Problem solved, right? No wife, no son, no coup. Just a balanced breakfast. But here's the thing about swallowing the goddess of wisdom. She doesn't just sit there. Metis, now hanging out in Zeus's stomach, apparently decided to get busy. She started crafting armor for her daughter inside Zeus. I want you to imagine the acoustics of a smithy inside a digestive system, the clanging, the hammering, the polishing of bronze. Zeus naturally developed a headache. And when I say a headache, I don't mean he needed a glass of water and a nap. I mean he was screaming so loud that the other gods were probably putting in noise complaints. He felt like his skull was being split open, which, in a moment of foreshadowing, was exactly what needed to happen. He called for Hephaestus, the smith god, or maybe it was Prometheus. Whoever it was, they showed up with an axe, because in ancient Greek medicine, the cure for a migraine was apparently blunt force trauma. They cracked Zeus's head open and out leaped Athena. She didn't come out as a baby. That would be too normal. She jumped out as a fully grown adult woman, dressed in full battle armor, holding a spear and shouting a war cry. She effectively skipped childhood, adolescence, and that awkward phase where you get braces and went straight to highly competent warrior goddess. You have to appreciate the efficiency. Zeus, surprisingly, wasn't even mad. He looked at this shouting, armored woman standing on his head and thought, you know what, she's cool. She instantly became his favorite child, which is saying something, considering he had about 100 of them. But Athena was special. She was the daughter of the father. She had no mother, technically, since Metis was still being gastric acid. This meant Athena was completely devoted to Zeus. She was the ultimate daddy's girl, if your dad was a lightning-throwing narcissist who ate your mom. So, Athena joins the pantheon. She's the goddess of war, but not the messy kind. That was Ares. Ares was the god of bloodlust, of screaming and hacking and going berserk. Ares was the guy who starts a fight in a parking lot at 2 a.m. Athena was the goddess of strategy. She was the general looking at the map, moving the pieces, calculating the odds. She was cool, detached, and tactical. She was the goddess of the smart fight. She was also the goddess of weaving, pottery, and crafts. Basically, if it required civilization and sitting still and focusing, Athena was your girl. She was the patron of the intellect. In a family full of gods who ruled by emotion and impulse, Athena ruled by logic. She was the gray-eyed goddess. And gray-eyed here, glaukopis in Greek, doesn't just mean the color. It means bright-eyed or gleaming-eyed, like an owl, which is why the owl became her symbol. Small, quiet, sees in the dark, and eats vermin. Fitting. Now, let's float over to one of her first big public relations moments, the naming of Athens. At this point, the city of Athens wasn't called Athens. It was just a nice piece of real estate in Attica, and the gods were shopping around for patronage deals. Being a patron god of a city was a big deal. You got the best temples, the best sacrifices, and steady ego boosts. Both Athena and her uncle Poseidon wanted the city. Poseidon was the god of the sea, earthquakes and horses. He was powerful, moody, and generally wet. He felt he deserved the city because, well, he was Poseidon. They decided to have a contest. The rules were simple. Whoever gave the mortals the best gift would get the city. The king of the city, a half-snake guy named Cecropes, don't ask, Greek genealogy is a nightmare, was the judge. Poseidon went first. He stepped up, raised his trident, and struck the rock of the Acropolis. Crack! A spring of water gushed out. Everyone was impressed. Water, they thought. That's useful. But then they tasted it. It was salt water. Because again, Poseidon is the god of the sea. He didn't think to filter it. So, while it was a neat trick, and arguably a nice landscaping feature, it was useless for drinking or irrigation. It was just a salty puddle. Thanks, Uncle P. Then it was Athena's turn. She stepped forward, probably adjusted her helmet, and quietly knelt down. She planted a seed in the ground. Within moments, it sprouted and grew into a full-sized olive tree. Now, on the surface, a tree seems less dramatic than a magical geyser, but the people of the city and King Cecropes looked at it. The olive tree gave wood for building. It gave oil for lamps and cooking. It gave olives for eating. It was the Swiss Army knife of agriculture. It was economic stability in tree form. King Cecropes declared Athena the winner. The city was named Athens. Poseidon, being a mature and reasonable adult, took the loss with grace. Just kidding. He threw a massive tantrum and flooded the Thracian plain, because if he couldn't have the city, he was going to make sure everyone's basement was damp for the next millennium. But the name stuck. Athens belonged to Athena. This victory really set the tone for who she was. She wasn't about brute force. She was about utility, civilization, making things that actually work. While Poseidon was showing off his raw power, Athena was thinking about the GDP. But let's not pretend Athena was all logic and benevolence. She was a Greek god after all. She had a streak of jealousy and pettiness that could rival Hera's on a bad day. She was what we might call a strict perfectionist. And nothing triggers a perfectionist more than someone else thinking they're better than you. Which brings us to a slightly sadder story, the story of Pallas. You might hear Athena referred to as Pallas Athena. It sounds dignified, doesn't it? But the origin of that name is one of those tragic childhood accidents that haunts you forever. When Athena was growing up, well, after she popped out of the head, she was raised by Triton. Triton was a sea god, a son of Poseidon. He had a daughter named Pallas. Pallas and Athena were best friends. They were both warrior girls, tomboys, always wrestling and sparring and practicing with spears. They were inseparable. One day they were sparring a little too intensely. They were going at it, spear against spear, shield against shield. Zeus, ever the helicopter parent, was watching from the clouds. He saw Pallas about to strike Athena. Now, Athena could handle herself. She was the goddess of war, crying out loud. But Zeus got nervous. He didn't want his favorite head-born daughter getting a scratch. So Zeus lowered his shield, the aegis, between them to distract Pallas. Pallas, startled by the sudden appearance of a divine artifact, froze. She looked up, and in that split second of hesitation, Athena, who was already mid-thrust, couldn't stop her momentum. She struck her best friend. The spear went right through her.
Pallas died. Athena was devastated. This wasn't an enemy, this was her sister in arms, her only real friend. In her grief, Athena made a wooden statue of Pallas, the Palladium, and she took her friend's name. From then on, she was Pallas Athena. She carried the name of the friend she killed, effectively wearing her guilt as a title. It's a heavy detail. It adds a layer of melancholy to the perfect goddess. She's wise, yes. She's strong, yes. But she carries a permanent reminder that even the goddess of strategy can make a mistake in the heat of the moment. And usually when gods make mistakes, other people die. The Palladium, that wooden statue she carved, became a legendary artifact. It was said that as long as the Palladium stayed inside the city of Troy, the city could not fall. Which is ironic because later on, during the Trojan War, Athena would be the one working the hardest to make sure Troy burned to the ground. But we'll get to that. The gods are nothing if not hypocritical. It's interesting to look at Athena's social life, or lack thereof. She was one of the 3 virgin goddesses, along with Artemis and Hestia. She had 0 interest in romance, none. She was married to her job, and her job was being better than everyone else. Unlike Artemis, who ran off to the woods to avoid men and hang out with deer, Athena stayed right in the thick of things. She liked heroes. She liked men who did things. She was the ultimate bro girl. She hung out with Odysseus, Hercules, Perseus, Jason. She was the voice in their ear, telling them which monster to stab and how to solve the riddle. She was the original backseat driver, but unlike your passenger, she was actually right. But being a virgin goddess didn't mean she avoided scandal. There's a weird story involving Hephaestus, the blacksmith god who cracked Zeus's head open earlier. Yeah, him. Hephaestus had a crush on Athena, a big one. He went to Zeus and asked for her hand. Zeus, who was usually creating marriage alliances like he was playing a game of Crusader Kings, surprisingly said, "Go for it if you can catch her," which was Zeus speak for, "This is going to be funny to watch." Hephaestus, who had a limp and wasn't exactly the George Clooney of Olympus, tried to make a move on Athena in his workshop. Athena was there to get some weapons fixed, strictly business. Hephaestus lunged at her. Athena, being a warrior and generally uninterested, easily shoved him away. But Hephaestus was, let's say, very excited, and in the scuffle, some of his genetic material fell onto Athena's leg. Athena, looking down with a face of absolute disgust, grabbed a piece of wool, wiped it off, and threw the wool onto the ground. She was probably thinking, "I am the goddess of wisdom. I do not have time for this nonsense." But here's where Gaia, the earth, comes in. The wool hit the ground. Gaia, being the earth mother, got impregnated by the discarded material, because the soil is apparently very fertile in mythology. A baby was born from the ground. His name was Arachne. He was half man, half snake. Athena, perhaps feeling a weird sense of responsibility since she was technically the mother via a wool wipe, adopted him. She put him in a box, because what else do you do with a snake baby, and gave the box to the daughters of Cecrops, telling them, "Do not open this box." Of course, they opened the box. They saw the snake child, went insane, and threw themselves off the Acropolis. Athena then raised Arachne herself. He became one of the early kings of Athens. So, in a very roundabout, biological mishap kind of way, Athena did have a son, a snake son who became king of her city. It really reinforces the idea that the royal line of Athens was just a series of very confused reptiles and geology experiments. It's this kind of stuff that makes you realize why Athena was so stoic. Look at her family. Her dad eats wives, her uncle floods cities because he lost a contest, her suitor accidentally impregnates the floor. If you had to deal with this every day, you'd probably retreat into stoicism and weaving, too. Speaking of weaving, we can't talk about Athena without talking about Arachne. This is the classic "don't hubris where you eat" story. Arachne was a mortal woman, a weaver. She was incredibly talented. People would travel miles just to watch her spin wool. She was so good that people started saying, "Wow, she must have been taught by Athena herself."
Now, a smart person would say, yes, thank you to the goddess for her blessings. A smart person would realize that gods are insecure narcissists who need constant validation. Arachne was not a smart person. She said, Athena? Please, I'm better than her. Let her come down here and challenge me. I'll weave her under the table. Athena heard this, of course she did, but showing a rare moment of restraint, she didn't just smite her immediately. She disguised herself as an old woman and visited Arachne. She gave her a chance to recant. She said, listen, dear, you're talented, but don't disrespect the gods. Ask for forgiveness, and Athena will probably let it slide. Arachne laughed. She told the old lady to get lost and repeated her challenge. Athena dropped the disguise. She grew to her full, terrifying, divine height. The bystanders panicked. Arachne, to her credit or her stupidity, didn't flinch. She sat down at her loom. Athena sat down at hers. The weave-off was on. Athena wove a tapestry depicting the gods in all their glory. Specifically, she wove the scene of her contest with Poseidon, showing herself victorious. In the corners, she wove scenes of mortals who had challenged gods and were punished. It was a visual warning. It was subtle, elegant, and intimidating. Arachne, on the other hand, decided to double down. She wove a tapestry depicting the gods behaving badly. She showed Zeus cheating on Hera again and again and again. She showed Poseidon being a creep. She showed Apollo being a disaster. It was essentially a tabloid in tapestry form, the Real Housewives of Mount Olympus. The problem was that Arachne's work was flawless. It was better than Athena's. The technique was perfect. The images were lifelike. Athena stood up. She looked at Arachne's work. She saw that it was perfect, and she saw that it was insulting. So, being the goddess of wisdom, she reacted with total calm. Just kidding, she lost it. She took her shuttle, the wooden tool used for weaving, and beat Arachne over the head with it. She ripped the tapestry to shreds. Arachne, suddenly realizing that picking a fight with a war goddess was a bad career move, felt a wave of shame and terror. She tried to hang herself. Athena stopped her. She said, no, you don't get to die. You want to spin? You want to weave? Fine, you can spin forever. She sprinkled some juice from Hecate's herbs. Arachne's hair fell out. Her nose and ears disappeared. Her head shrank. Her fingers turned into long, thin legs. She became the first spider. And that is why spiders weave webs, because a girl in Lydia was too proud to admit that a goddess might be better at knitting than she was. It's a harsh lesson, but it fits Athena's brand perfectly. She helps you if you're a hero. She guides you if you're smart. But if you insult her, she'll ruin your life. She's the calm in the center of the storm, but she's also the one directing the storm. Now, as we settle deeper into this, I want to look at her role in the biggest event of the mythological calendar, the event that ruined everyone's weekend for 10 years, the Trojan War. Because if you think Athena was just a bystander in that mess, you are very, very wrong. She was the campaign manager.
But first, let's just take a breath. Imagine that olive tree again. Sitting on the Acropolis, rustling in the wind, the salt spring is bubbling nearby. It's quiet. A spider crawls across a leaf. Just a normal day in ancient Greece. Okay, let's talk about a golden apple. The apple, the shepherd, and the grudge. So, the golden apple. It all started at a wedding. Because in Greek mythology, if people aren't dying, they are getting married, and usually the latter leads to the former anyway. This was the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. You don't really need to know much about them except that Thetis was a sea nymph who was destined to have a son greater than his father. Remember that prophecy. So Zeus married her off to a mortal man to avoid the whole being overthrown thing. They invited everyone. All the gods, all the minor deities, the Nereids, probably the local dryads. It was the event of the season. But they made one crucial mistake. They didn't invite Eris. Eris is the goddess of discord. She is the personification of starting drama for no reason. Not inviting the goddess of discord to your wedding is logically sound, but practically disastrous. It's like not inviting your most toxic aunt to Thanksgiving. You know she's going to show up anyway, and she's going to make a scene in the driveway. Eris showed up. She didn't storm the gates, she didn't flip the buffet table, she just tossed a golden apple into the crowd. Inscribed on the apple were the words, "To the fairest." Now, if you throw an apple into a crowd of mortals, someone eats it. If you throw it into a crowd of goddesses, you start a world war. 3 goddesses immediately claimed it: Hera, the queen of the gods, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and our girl, Athena. It's interesting that Athena jumped in here. You wouldn't think she'd care. She's the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and heavy infantry. You'd think she'd look at a golden fruit and say, "This is clearly a trap," or "I don't need external validation, I have a spear." But apparently, even the goddess of wisdom has a vanity streak. She wanted that apple. She wanted to be the fairest. They turned to Zeus to judge. Zeus, proving he was the only one with any survival instinct, said absolutely not. He knew that if he picked one, the other 2 would make his life miserable for eternity. So he outsourced the decision. He sent them to Mount Ida near Troy to find a shepherd named Paris. Paris was actually a prince of Troy, but he was living as a shepherd because, you guessed it, a prophecy said he would destroy the city. His parents, King Priam and Queen Hecuba, had left him on a mountain to die as a baby. But a bear nursed him because nature is weird, and he grew up to be a very handsome, very simple shepherd. So imagine Paris. He's sitting on a rock, watching sheep, maybe playing a flute poorly. Suddenly, Hermes pops out of the air, followed by 3 10-foot-tall glowing goddesses. They didn't just ask him to choose, they bribed him. This was standard Greek politics. Hera offered him power. She said, "Pick me and I'll make you the king of Europe and Asia. You will rule the world." A solid offer. Athena stepped up. She didn't offer him a kingdom, she offered him glory. She said, "Pick me and I'll make you the greatest warrior in history. You will never lose a battle. You will be the master of strategy. You will be the wisest man alive." Basically, she offered to turn him into Alexander the Great. For a shepherd living in the Bronze Age, this was a ticket to immortality. It was the competence package. Then Aphrodite stepped up. She adjusted her sash and said, "Pick me and you can have the most beautiful woman in the world." Paris, being a young man with more hormones than brain cells, didn't hesitate. He didn't want to rule Asia. He didn't want to be a brilliant general. He wanted the girl. He gave the apple to Aphrodite. The most beautiful woman was Helen. The problem was, Helen was already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. But details, right? Paris got the girl, Aphrodite got the apple, and Athena got insulted. This is the moment the switch flipped. Before this, Athena was fairly neutral towards Troy. They had temples to her, they respected her. But now, Paris had looked at the goddess of wisdom and said, "No thanks, I'd rather date." Athena took this personally. She decided that Troy didn't just need to lose, it needed to be erased. She joined Team Greece, the Achaeans, with a cold, calculated fury. Hera joined her, mostly because she was also rejected, and they formed the We Hate Paris Club. When the war started, Athena wasn't just a spectator, she was an active participant. But she didn't fight like Ares. Ares would run onto the battlefield screaming, hacking at limbs, and generally making a mess. Ares loved the gore. Athena loved the win. There's a famous scene in the Iliad that perfectly captures her style. It's right at the beginning. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, is furious with Agamemnon, the Greek king. They're arguing over a girl, because the whole war is about girls, apparently. Achilles is about to draw his sword and kill Agamemnon right there in the camp. Now, if Achilles kills the king, the army falls apart and the Greeks lose. Athena can't have that. So she flies down from Olympus, but she makes herself invisible to everyone except Achilles. She comes up behind him and grabs him by his hair.
Just picture that. The invincible warrior, mid-rage, suddenly gets his head yanked back by an invisible force. He turns around and sees Athena. Her eyes are blazing. It's terrifying. She tells him, essentially, don't do it. Put the sword away. Abuse him with words, sure, call him names, but do not kill him. If you listen to me, you'll get 3 times the reward later. Achilles, who listened to no one, listened to Athena. He sheathed his sword. That is Athena's power. She is the restraint that stops you from making a fatal mistake in anger. She is the voice in your head that says, don't hit send on that email. Throughout the war, she was the ultimate micromanager. She was always hovering around Odysseus, her favorite. Odysseus was the only mortal who really got her. He was tricky, he was a liar, he was a strategist. He didn't overpower people, he outsmarted them. Athena loved that. She treated him more like a pet project than a subject. But her most aggressive moment came with Diomedes. Diomedes was another Greek hero, a solid B+ warrior who was having an A+ day thanks to Athena. She gave him the ability to see the gods on the battlefield. She told him, avoid the other gods, but if you see Aphrodite, feel free to stab her, because Athena was still petty about that apple. Diomedes went on a rampage. He actually did stab Aphrodite in the wrist, sending her crying back to Olympus. But then he ran into Ares. Ares was on the Trojan side, mostly because Aphrodite asked him to be. He was huge, terrifying, and slaughtering Greeks. Diomedes was brave, but he wasn't stupid. He saw the god of war and backed up. Athena appeared beside Diomedes in his chariot. Now you have a mortal man and the goddess of war sharing a chariot. The axle groaned under the weight of her divinity. She grabbed the reins. She drove the chariot straight at Ares. Ares saw them coming and thrust his massive spear at Diomedes. Athena, with a flick of her wrist, caught the spear and shoved it aside. Then she guided Diomedes' spear. She didn't just encourage him, she added her force to the thrust. The spear hit Ares right in the gut.
Ares bellowed. The poet says he screamed as loud as 9,000 men. He turned into a cloud of dust and fled to Olympus to whine to Zeus. It was a total victory. Athena had humiliated the god of war on his own turf. It proved her point. Brute strength is nothing without aim. Ares was a butcher. Athena was a surgeon. But the war dragged on. 10 years. 10 years of camping on a beach, eating bad food and getting shot at. Even the gods were getting bored. Heroes were dying. Hector was dead. Achilles was dead, shot in the heel by Paris of all people, which must have annoyed Athena to no end. The guy who rejected me just killed my best soldier with a cheap shot. They needed an endgame. They needed a trick. And who was the goddess of tricks? Who was the goddess of carpentry? Who was the goddess of let's build something weird and see if they fall for it? Athena. The Trojan horse wasn't just Odysseus's idea. It was divinely inspired. Athena planted the seed. Build a horse, make it hollow, hide the guys inside. It was a plan that relied entirely on the enemy being superstitious and curious. It was a psychological op. The Greeks built the horse. They burned their camp and sailed away, hiding just around the coast. They left the horse on the beach with an inscription. For their return home, the Greeks dedicate this offering to Athena. See, she put her name on it. It was a breathing exercise. The Trojans came out. They saw the giant wooden pony. They argued about what to do with it. Some said, burn it. Some said, push it into the sea. But there was a priest named Laocoon. He was smart. He said, I don't trust Greeks bearing gifts. He actually threw a spear at the horse, and it made a hollow thud. This was a problem. If they opened the horse, the war was over, and the Greeks would be slaughtered. Athena couldn't let her plan fail in the final hour. So she, or perhaps Poseidon, acting on the plan's behalf, the gods were coordinating well that day, sent 2 giant sea serpents out of the water.
The serpent slithered up the beach, grabbed Laocoon and his sons, and, well, that was the end of the dissenting opinion. The Trojans took this as a sign. Oh, the gods hated that he threw a spear at the horse. We better bring it inside. They dragged the horse into the city. They had to tear down part of their own walls to fit it in. They partied, they drank, they fell asleep. And then the belly of the horse opened. Athena didn't fight in the sack of Troy. She didn't need to. She had engineered it. She watched as the city burned. She watched as the royal family was destroyed. King Priam dead. Paris dead. The walls she had helped build in a distant past, or at least walls she had admired, crumbled. It was a complete wipeout, and it was all because a shepherd didn't give her a piece of fruit. You have to respect the commitment to a grudge. But the victory lap was short-lived, because here's the thing about Greek soldiers. They are sore winners. During the sack of Troy, a lesser Greek hero, Ajax the Lesser, not the big famous Ajax, the other one, found Cassandra, the Trojan princess, hiding in Athena's temple. She was clinging to the statue of Athena for protection. Now, sanctuary is a big deal. You don't touch someone in a temple. It's a safe zone. Ajax didn't care. He dragged Cassandra away. In the process, he knocked over Athena's statue. Athena had just spent 10 years fighting for these guys. She had handed them victory on a platter, and in return, they desecrated her temple and insulted her statue. Athena's mood shifted instantly. She went from "Go Team Greece" to "I hope you all drown." She went to Poseidon, her old rival, the guy she beat for Athens. She said, "Hey, uncle, you want to mess up some ships?" Poseidon was delighted. As the Greek fleet sailed home, victorious and loaded with loot, the storm hit. It wasn't just rain, it was a divine washing machine. Ships were smashed against rocks, heroes drowned, men who had survived 10 years of war died in the cold water. Ajax the Lesser? Poseidon smashed his ship. Ajax managed to cling to a rock and shouted, "Not even the gods can kill me." Poseidon, presumably rolling his eyes, split the rock with his trident. Ajax fell into the sea and drowned. Athena watched it all. She didn't care that they were her soldiers. They had broken the rules. And if there's one thing Athena loves more than winning, it's the rules. This brings us to the aftermath, the hangover of the Bronze Age. The Greeks were scattered, and one man, Odysseus, was about to start the longest commute in history. Athena looked at Odysseus, lost, drifting, cursed by Poseidon, and thought, "Okay, I'll save that one. He's funny." But before we follow Odysseus on his boat trip, let's take a moment to drift away from the war. Let's look at Athena when she's not killing people. Let's look at her calmer side, the flute, the weaving, the strange relationship she had with a half-horse musician. Because even a war goddess needs hobbies. The flute, the commute, and the jury duty. So, let's talk about hobbies. When you're an immortal being with infinite time on your hands, you eventually run out of wars to strategize. You can only polish your shield so many times before it becomes a mirror, and frankly, Athena didn't always like what she saw. Not because she wasn't striking, she was a goddess after all, but because she was critical. In one of these quiet periods between destroying cities, Athena decided to pick up music. She wanted to invent something. The lyre was already taken by Apollo, after Hermes stole a tortoise shell, but that's a whole other story. So Athena invented the aulos. The aulos was a double-piped flute. It made a sharp, penetrating sound, sort of an oboe that's had too much coffee. Athena was quite proud of it. She fashioned it from deer bones, as one does, and decided to debut her new talent at a banquet on Mount Olympus. Picture the scene. The gods are lounging on clouds, eating ambrosia, probably gossiping about who Zeus is chasing this week. Athena stands up. She calls for silence. She puts the double flute to her lips and begins to play. The music was fine, technically proficient, but as she played, she noticed something. Hera and Aphrodite were nudging each other. They were covering their mouths. They were giggling. Now, Athena can handle hatred. She can handle war. She cannot handle being laughed at by her stepmother and the goddess of love. She stopped playing. She went to a quiet stream in the woods of Phrygia to practice alone. As she played by the water, she looked down at her reflection and she saw the problem. To play the Aulis, you have to puff your cheeks out, like a chipmunk or a very determined frog. It distorted her face. It made her look silly.
For Athena, dignity was more important than art. She looked at the reflection, looked at the flute, and immediately threw the instrument into the bushes. She declared, "This thing is cursed. Anyone who picks it up will meet a terrible end." It's the ultimate taking my ball and going home move. If I look bad playing it, no one gets to enjoy it. Of course, someone picked it up. A satyr named Marsyas found the flute. He didn't know about the curse. He just knew it was a nice flute that played beautiful music almost by itself. He practiced, he got really good, so good, in fact, that he challenged Apollo to a music contest. Never challenge the god of music to a music contest. It ends poorly. Marsyas lost, and Apollo flayed him alive. It's a gruesome detail, but it circles back to Athena. She didn't kill Marsyas, she just left a loaded weapon in the bushes and cursed it. It's that precise, hands-off kind of cruelty she excelled at. She warned you, you didn't listen, not her problem. With her musical career over, Athena went back to her favorite pastime, managing the life of Odysseus. We left Odysseus drifting around the Mediterranean, dealing with monsters and witches. Everyone else from the Trojan War was either home or dead. Odysseus was just stuck. Athena felt bad. Well, as bad as a goddess can feel. She liked Odysseus. He was the only mortal who thought like her. He was pragmatic. He was a survivor. While Poseidon was off vacationing in Ethiopia, the gods took weird vacations, Athena slipped into a council meeting with Zeus. She made her pitch. "Dad, look, Odysseus has been suffering for 10 years. Calypso has him trapped on an island. He's sad. He's crying on the beach. Can we please let him go home?" Zeus, who had a soft spot for Athena, agreed. "Fine. Send Hermes to free him. You handle the family." This is where Athena shifts from war goddess to guidance counselor. She flew down to Ithaca, Odysseus's home. The place was a mess. Everyone thought Odysseus was dead. 100 greedy suitors had moved into his palace, eating his food, drinking his wine, and trying to marry his wife, Penelope. Athena didn't just zap the suitors with lightning. That would be too easy. She wanted a plan. She wanted a narrative arc. She disguised herself. She loved disguises. She appeared as a family friend named Mentes. She found Telemachus, Odysseus's son. Telemachus was a depressed 20-something living in his dad's shadow, watching these jerks ruin his house. He felt helpless. Athena sat him down. She didn't give him a magic sword. She gave him a pep talk. She told him, "You are your father's son. Stop moping. Get a ship. Go find news of him. Grow up." Later, she appeared as another old guy named Mentor. This is literally where we get the word mentor, a wise, older advisor who tells you to get your act together. She guided Telemachus, helped him gather a crew, and sent him on a gap-year trip around Greece to build his confidence. Meanwhile, she was coordinating Odysseus's return. When he finally washed up on the shores of Ithaca, asleep and confused, she was there. But she didn't appear in armor. She appeared as a young shepherd boy. She stood over him. Odysseus woke up. He didn't know where he was. He asked the boy about the island. Then Odysseus did what Odysseus does best. He lied. He spun a long, intricate, completely fake backstory about who he was and how he got there. He lied right to the face of the goddess of wisdom. Athena smiled. She transformed back into her glorious self. She stroked his hand. She wasn't mad. She was delighted. "You chameleon," she said. "You bottomless bag of tricks. Even here in your own country, you can't stop lying. I love it." It's a genuinely sweet moment. It's two master manipulators acknowledging each other's game. She told him, "I haven't abandoned you. I've been busy, but now we have work to do."
They sat under an olive tree, her tree, and plotted the murder of the suitors. It was a bonding activity. She disguised him as an old beggar. She withered his skin, dimmed his eyes, and put him in rags. She wanted him to gather intel. She wanted him to see who was loyal and who wasn't. She was setting up the board for the final checkmate. When the battle finally came, in the great hall with the doors locked, Athena was there. She was up in the rafters, watching as a swallow. Occasionally, she would deflect a spear that came too close to Odysseus. She let him and Telemachus do the heavy lifting, but she kept the odds in their favor. When the dust settled, Odysseus was king again. The house was clean, well, after they scrubbed the floors. Order was restored. Athena's favorite human was back where he belonged. But Athena's work wasn't just about restoring kings. It was about civilization, and civilization needs laws. This brings us to one of the most important moments in Greek mythology, and arguably the invention of the modern justice system, the story of Orestes. It's a dark family drama. The house of Atreus makes the Skywalkers look functional. Here's the recap. Agamemnon came home from Troy. His wife, Clytemnestra, killed him in the bath with an axe. Then their son, Orestes, killed Clytemnestra to avenge his father. So Orestes committed matricide. This is a big no-no. The Furies, ancient, terrifying deities of vengeance, who looked like old women with snakes for hair and dripped blood from their eyes, chased Orestes. They didn't care about the context. They just knew son killed mom, punishment is eternal torment. Orestes ran to Delphi, to Apollo. Apollo said, "I told you to do it, but I can't stop the Furies. Go to Athens. Ask Athena." So Orestes ran to Athens. He collapsed at the feet of Athena's statue on the Acropolis. The Furies surrounded him, screeching, demanding his blood. Athena appeared. She looked at the Furies. She looked at Orestes. In the old days, this would have been a blood feud. The Furies would tear him apart. End of story. But Athena said, "No, we are not doing this. We are not doing vigilante justice anymore. We are going to have a trial." She established the court of Acropolis. She selected 12 upstanding citizens of Athens to be the jury. This was new. Humans deciding the fate of a human presided over by a god. The trial began. Apollo acted as the defense attorney. He argued that Orestes had a duty to avenge his father, who was a king. The Furies acted as the prosecution. They argued that blood crimes against a mother are unforgivable and that chaos would rule if children could kill parents. It was a heated debate. Athena sat in the judge's chair, listening. She didn't interrupt. She let the process happen. Finally, the jury voted. They cast stones into an urn, a white stone for innocent, a black stone for guilty. Athena counted the votes. 6 for guilty, 6 for innocent, a hung jury.
In a modern court, this might mean a mistrial, but Athena had made a rule beforehand. She said, if the votes are equal, I will cast the deciding vote, and I vote for mercy. She placed her white stone in the urn. Orestes was acquitted. The logic was personal. She said, I was not born of a mother. I came from my father's head. I prioritize the father's line. It's a bit of patriarchal bias baked into the system, sure, but the outcome was significant. It broke the cycle of blood vengeance. It replaced an eye for an eye with, let's talk about this and vote. The Furies were furious. They threatened to poison the land of Athens. They were ready to destroy the crops and make everyone sterile. Athena didn't fight them. She didn't pull out her spear. She used her other weapon, diplomacy. She said, look, you guys are ancient and powerful. I respect that, but don't destroy my city. If you stay here, I will give you a new job. You won't be the Furies anymore. You will be the Eumenides, the kindly ones. You will be the protectors of justice. People will worship you. You'll get a nice cave under the hill. Great benefits. She flattered them. She offered them a place in the new order, and surprisingly, they took the deal. They calmed down. They put away their whips and snakes, mostly. This is Athena's greatest victory, not killing a giant, not sacking a city, but turning monsters into civil servants. She took the chaotic, bloody forces of the old world and integrated them into a structured, lawful society. She literally domesticated vengeance. It's the perfect ending to her arc. She started as a headache inside Zeus's skull, a weapon forged in secret. She ended as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, teaching humanity that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't just stab each other when we're mad. So let's leave Athena there, sitting on the Acropolis. The sun is setting over Athens, the olive trees are casting long, cool shadows. The owl is waking up, blinking its large golden eyes. Below, in the city, people are arguing in the marketplace, lawyers are drafting contracts, and weavers are finishing their tapestries. It's all ticking along, organized, rational, a little bit stiff maybe, but safe. Athena takes a deep breath of the salt air, courtesy of Poseidon, who is still sulking somewhere nearby, and leans back. Her helmet is off, the spear is leaning against a column. The work is done. The city is asleep. And now, you should be too. Good night, guys.